joining me in studio once again today is Chris Motz. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Chris is the executive director of the South Dakota Catholic Conference. And today we're going to talk about the 2022 South Dakota legislative session. And that's a mouthful.
Indeed.
For us who don't live it every day to say. So, Chris, before we get into sort of the details of this session, I think it's good for the listeners just to sort of take a little bit of a step back and think about why a show called Catholic Views, why are we talking about politics? Because everybody knows that faith and politics don't the fact that a theologian and a lobbyist are sitting across the table from it, like, this is just...
Well, I mean, I often joke that the biggest part of my job is to help people get ready for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner with the family. Brother. It's like, what are the two things you're never supposed to talk about, especially at the same time in polite company, faith and politics? Keep your religion and keep your politics out of the family meals. I've had many people tell me that. Even people that are like really, engaged with the faith, like,
Absolutely.
When I, go visit such and such family members, there are a couple of things that are not on the table. What do you do with that? Yeah. So your question's a very, very good one. How do we talk about it? I think one of the places we have to start is it's actually a principle of Catholic social teaching that we don't often think about as one of these principles that, so we've got like human dignity, the common good, subsidiarity, solidarity, but there's this other principle of Catholic social teaching called the duty of participation. The duty of participation. It's this idea that actually we have an obligation to seek the good of the community in which we live. And we can think about community in a lot of different ways, from like the community of our family, the community of our parish, but that also extends to the political community in which we live, meaning, our city, our county, our state, our country. And this is important. A lot of times when people are thinking about politics and political engagement, I kind of blame cable news for a lot of this, but our mind just goes to national politics.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that's just like off-putting, or I'll get into it every 2 or 4 years for like, that 8 to 12 months ahead of the election. But actually, for us as Catholics, this duty of participation is not just on a 4-year election cycle, but it's every day of the year, all the time. And it's to be discerned, obviously, can be different for different people. But I really encourage people, think about, how do you live out this duty of participation vis-a-vis this beautiful place in which we all live, the state of South Dakota?
Yep.
We've got this legislative session, comes around once a year, January, February, March. What's going on in your state capital? And how are your views as a Catholic citizen really getting a hearing there? So there's kind of this theological component, if you will, for us. There's also this very practical component of the duty of participation. The form of government that we have, a democracy, a democratic republic, you can be as virtuous, as Mother Teresa and staying at home, but democracy doesn't necessarily just reward virtuous people who stay at home. Practically speaking, you got to show up.
Right.
Democracy rewards engagement. So if you really deeply care about the fabric of your community and the moral fabric of our laws, but it begins and ends with you complaining over the newspaper and your breakfast cereal, well, that doesn't necessarily help. You gotta reach out.
And I really liked actually how you started because it pokes at a weakness for us, I think, as Americans. You talked about the duty of participation, not the right to participate.
Right.
We as Americans, we love, I have the right to, but we're less comfortable when it comes to obligation or responsibility or duty.
Yeah.
For us as Catholics, it's our duty to the extent we can, and what that's going to look like is going to vary from person to person. But to the extent we can, we're obliged.
Yeah.
We're supposed to. And that, who are you to? Well, this is what our faith tells us. It's one of the principles, as you said, of Catholic social teaching.
Yeah, I've heard stories too of sharing this duty with Catholics. I get stories of people from their childhood. My dad would always write letters And one person even said, my dad would write a letter with carbon paper. What's that?
Oh, yeah.
He'd stick one of the letters.
That's where you hit the CC of the email, right?
He'd stick one of the letters in the mail, and then he'd put the carbon copy up on the fridge so he would remember what he wrote. Yeah. We can still do that today. And actually, it's via email. It's even easier than handwriting a letter with, carbon copy paper. But we can still do that via email. And the beautiful thing about South Dakota is that our legislators will read those personally. Sometimes they get really busy and don't have time to respond individually during kind of the height of the legislative session, but they will read your email.
Chris, a quick question about efficacy in the political process.
Yeah.
Email versus mail. Does it matter, do you think? We're talking specifically here about South Dakota. I mean, email is so much quicker, and maybe there's timely reasons why. Sometimes I do wonder, though, but maybe this is more of a more relevant at the national level than the state
That's
level.
a great question. I would say, by and large, you can go with email, especially if you're writing on a specific bill that is going to be really, time sensitive. But I do know that personal handwritten letters can be really, powerful. Last year, the South Dakota Catholic Conference supported a bill that expanded homeschooling rights in the state of South Dakota. And one of the beautiful things that many homeschool families did, both in advance of the bill, but following it also, was just they wrote a letter to their representatives, to their senator, saying, hey, here's what this is how we live our life. Here's how we educate. Here's a picture of our kids. So that personal contact, just saying, hey, this is an issue that's important to us, and here's who we are. That's a powerful thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so that can be a helpful.
It can be helpful, but by and large, email works well. What isn't helpful necessarily if you're cutting and pasting, like I'm going to cut and paste the bishop's conference statement. No, just think if you're reading the bishop's conference statement, that's a beautiful thing. Those statements are. Please read them,
doing that.
But just let it sink in and just think about what's important here, and then try and repeat it in your own words.
Right.
Or if maybe there's one particular aspect that really touches your heart, just put that in your own words for your legislator.
Okay, so let's talk about what's important this year in this current legislative session for 2022.
Sure. Well, one thing, a position that the South Dakota Catholic Conference just published is a position in opposition to Senate Joint Resolution 502. And you might be, if you're paying attention, you're like, well, hold on. It's not a bill. What's a Senate joint resolution? A joint resolution, if passed by both chambers of the legislature, then goes on to the voters for a vote. So SJR 502 has to do with sports betting. Last year, the voters approved a change to the state constitution that permits sports betting in the city of Deadwood. Which, as most of us know, it's kind of like a mini Reno or Vegas.
Right.
It's kind of a small mountain casino town, kind of a destination gambling spot. And that was approved by the voters last year. And what the proponents were saying at the time was, let's, some Supreme Court case law has made this possible. We can now, bet on sports games just in Deadwood. It's just part of the vacation gambling experience. But just in Deadwood. And now there's this move to not just in Deadwood, but, we can do this in our mobile devices throughout the state if we change our state constitution. So gambling is governed through the state constitution. That's very typical throughout the 50 states to do it that way. So SJR 502 would permit sports betting anywhere in the state, any place, anytime, through your mobile device. And of course, in the Catholic mind, gambling isn't wrong per se.
Right.
But there are certain forms of gambling that are not just sort of this, recreational vacation. I'm going to go to the casino and I've got my budget or whatever, but are more conducive to the words that the Catechism uses are enslavement. Mm-hmm. They're more conducive to addiction. And that's when we start expressing concerns as Catholics. So we look at what this does to the human soul that is actually subject to the addiction, what it does to the families that are impacted, what it does to communities. So we've got some concerns. We're urging a no vote on SJR 502.
So again, that's about basically extending the scope of sports gambling beyond the city of Deadwood.
Yep. You would have a casino in your pocket.
Okay.
So it's been described by one legislator as video lottery 2.0.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So
There's an irony there, by the way. You and I have talked. I'm just going to point down this rabbit hole, but the irony that speaking of our phones, what's in my pocket, social media apps were engineered to be addictive, exactly modeled on gambling practices.
Yeah.
So that's
right. It does something to our brain.
It does.
Which is why which is why addiction is such a concern. And if you look at people who have actually been diagnosed with a gambling addiction disorder, nearly 1 in 5 of those people who have received that diagnosis will attempt suicide at some point.
Wow.
Like this is, there's really a human cost to this. Of course, proponents are looking at state revenues.
Right.
They're saying, oh, this is going to be a great boon, but we can't consider revenues in isolation from really the cost to souls.
Right.
So,
Right. That's not tax revenue is not the be all and end all of the common good.
That's right.
So
yeah.
So what else should Catholics be attentive to?
Senate Bill 159 is a bill that eliminates the death penalty for those who have been diagnosed with a severe mental illness. Okay. We've long supported bills that have curtailed, abrogated, kind of pulled back the death penalty, even in limited fashion, incrementalism. We would support even a complete ban, but we see this as a measure of mercy for those who have been diagnosed with something that's really, truly debilitating to their mental condition. Now, there's a lot of nuances in the criminal code, so there is something as not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yep.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who truly were competent and had the sufficient mens rea, the mental state to commit a crime, but actually there's something that has impaired them to a degree that we actually really want to extend a measure of mercy to certain people that have really debilitating mental illnesses like schizophrenia and so forth. So it's another.
So it would take that. So life in prison, life without parole.
That's right. So it would only take the death penalty off the table.
Okay.
We're still talking about the full spectrum of other punitive measures, including, if appropriate, life in prison.
Okay, great. If you're just tuning in, you are listening, watching Catholic Views. I'm the guest co-host, Chris Burgwald, visiting today with Chris Motz, the executive director of the South Dakota Catholic Conference. We're just talking about some of the bills that are making their way, or resolutions making their way, maybe making their way through the South Dakota legislative process this year. So in addition to Senate Joint Resolution 502 and Senate Bill 159, what else should we be attentive to?
Senate Bill 137 is a bill that affirmatively legalizes commercial surrogacy, which is a practice whereby a person or persons will pay a woman to be implanted with a human embryo, to go through pregnancy, give birth, and then surrender that child to the other contracting parties. It's intrinsically wrong. There's not a whole lot of prudential judgment in this one. This one is just wrong. There are a variety of ethical concerns. We can talk about the severance of the relationship between the birth mother and the child's right to be conceived in an act of love between its mother and father. We can talk about the harm that happens to women. We can also talk about the pro-life angle, the fact that only at best the data is indicating 7% of lab-created babies will live to see the light of day. The other 93% are intentionally destroyed, are frozen indefinitely, or otherwise don't survive the risks.
Right.
So there's a bit of confusion in some circles on this practice. People see it as, it's pro-life. You're helping people have start a family, et cetera, et cetera. We can never do evil that good may come.
Right.
So it is really important to acknowledge that the desire for family life that is experienced by couples who are, for one reason or another, not able to conceive, like this is such a good desire. Mm-hmm. The pain that's felt in infertility that's like real, but surrogacy is not the answer.
Right.
So unfortunately, this bill made it out of committee this week. It is going to be on the floor of the Senate. I think they're going to vote on Monday, which is, when are we airing?
Sunday.
Okay, so it's going to be on the floor of the Senate tomorrow. As people are listening, contact your senator and really urge them to vote no on Senate Bill 137.
Okay. So that's we don't have enough time, but surrogacy seems to be a recurring issue in South Dakota politics the last couple of years.
Yeah, it is coming up. And part of that is because there's an industry around it. So there's money to be made in this. That's when it first came onto our radar a couple of years ago, when there was a limited liability corporation that filed its articles of incorporation with the state, and somebody saw it and sent to me, like, what's going on? What is this? And actually, one of the problems that we're seeing in South Dakota is what they call reproductive tourism. We have people coming here from all over the world to hire South Dakota women because it's illegal in much of the world. When you're talking about China, or you're talking about Europe, so people come hire, strong, healthy South Dakota women, and then South Dakota children
bear the brunt.
Yeah. So
okay, what else, Chris?
Okay, House Bill 1005 just died in Senate committee recently. This is a bill that this one is hard to understand, honestly, that it died. This just would have said that boys use boys' bathrooms, girls use girls' bathrooms. Or for overnight accommodations for like high school travel and so forth, boys stay with boys, girls stay with girls. And obviously the elephant in the room is that gender ideology is pervaded in recent years. The reason that this has come back up in the legislature is because the Vermilion School District adopted a policy that permitted boys to use the girls' bathroom,
right,
and vice versa. People are wondering, some people are wondering why are people interested in school choice, in recent days? And it's like, well, this is, Exhibit A. It kind of is really difficult to understand that we've gotten to this point where there's confusion over this. But it is, in fact, a contentious topic. The reason I mention it, despite it being killed in committee, it's not over. There is, I think, significant possibility of what they call a smokeout on this bill, where it's called out of committee from the floor through a procedural maneuver. So, for people who are passionate about this, I really encourage you to reach out to your senators, and what you can encourage them to do is smoke out House Bill 1005.
So, did it die in House committee or Senate committee?
Senate committee.
It's already passed through the House.
Already passed through the House.
Okay.
Did well in the House, but it died by like a 6-1 vote in the Senate.
Okay.
The Senate really struggles with this issue.
Yeah, that's true. So they can contact their senator and ask them to smoke out House Bill 1005.
Smoke it out.
Smoke it out. I can see the posters now. That means something else. Anyway, moving on, Chris.
It's like we need the Surgeon General's warning on that.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
So
we got about 2, 3, 4 minutes left. What else do we need to know about?
Okay. House Bill 1113 is a pro-life bill. This is a bill that makes it a Class 5 felony to coerce a woman with a threat of murder, assault, kidnapping. If you threaten her with one of those things for the purpose of inducing an abortion, that's a Class 5 felony. Currently, it's only a felony if she actually follows through and gets the abortion. So it's kind of like tightening it up, closing a loophole. We want it to be illegal even to threaten her with those things. Okay. Kind of a common sense thing. And a Class 5 felony is a big deal. So we support that bill. That has not yet been heard in House, but I expect that bill to do really, really well in both chambers.
1113.
Correct.
Okay.
Senate Bill 46 is on the governor's desk. That is the Women's Sports Fairness in Women's Sports Bill. This has been a tough issue going back 4 years now. This is the fourth time the Catholic Conference has supported a bill along these lines that unless a sport is specifically designated as co-educational, that we should be clear that girls are playing girls' sports and boys are playing boys' sports, unless, again, it's designated as a co-ed sport. Made it through both chambers. It's on the governor's desk. We expect her to sign it. She brought this bill. And this bill is really evidence that, going back 4 years, it's a really hard conversation. There's people like, why, what's going on here? Whenever there's topics that there's just a lot of contentiousness in society, we just got to share our position with love, in truth, in compassion, but sometimes just kind of consistently sharing the truth over and over again. Again, not without being strident or losing our cool, but the consistency of over 4 years' time, now having it on the governor's desk, a wonderful thing. And I think sometimes we could use this maybe as an image for other difficult topics as well.
Right.
Just continue telling the truth over time.
Great.
And so glad that is where it's at. Okay, the last one that I will share just a little bit about, this is another bill that is on the governor's desk. And I think she's expected to sign this bill. This is Senate Bill 71, has already made it through both chambers. Thank you so much to all the Catholics in South Dakota who have worked hard on the South Dakota Partners in Education program.
Yep.
This is a school choice program. And Senate Bill 71 expanded the dollar cap on that program from $2 million to $3.5 million. And the reason they did that is because the program is working brilliantly. And there's a waiting list of families who meet the means-tested threshold, and they say, sign me up. I want to send my kid to a Catholic school. I want to send my kid to the Lutheran school. I want to send my kid to whatever non-public school it happens to be. You can get a scholarship for your child. And now the state has agreed to permit the program to operate at $3.5 million, just waiting for the governor's signature on that one.
Great. Chris, thanks for being here and sharing with us some of the things that are going on. Again, folks want to encourage you, maybe rewatch the show if you need to, but reach out to a number of these bills that are still in process, not on the governor's desk, to reach out and participate in your duty of participation. Thanks, Chris.
You bet.
And folks, thanks again for watching or listening. Again, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at SF Diocese to keep up with what's going on in the diocese and be part of our community online. This and other shows are available as videos on YouTube and the diocesan website, sfcatholic.org. So if you'd rather watch than listen, you now have that option. And that'll be all for us today. Hope you'll join us next week for more Catholic Views.